The galaxy shivered beneath the cold gaze of dying stars. Ancient suns, once fierce with the light of creation, now flickered weakly in the vast silence of the void. Their fading flames cast long shadows over worlds broken by war, their ruins whispering stories older than memory. From the depths of the Eye of Terror, a wound in the fabric of reality, came a chill that reached even the farthest reaches of the Imperium. It was the quiet before a storm no soul could hope to survive. But before we journey deeper into this tale, we want you to know this. We truly care for you, the listener, who shares this dark voyage with us. Wherever in the galaxy or beyond you are watching from, whether in the bright dawn of a living world or the lonely twilight of a forgotten moon, tell us, what time holds your corner of the universe now? Grab your coffee, settle your thoughts, and let us begin. In these twilight days, there stood one man among the ashes of a broken dream. He was not a god, nor a hero, but something far more complex. Ezekiel Abaddon, the first captain of the Sons of Horus. His name was whispered in fear and hope, in reverence and loathing, for he carried the heavy burden of legacy and ambition. The son of Horus, the once great war master, who almost shattered the Imperium itself, Abaddon bore the scars of a galaxy betrayed. His mind was a battlefield. He wrestled with shadows, memories of a father's fall, the bitter taste of betrayal, and the crushing weight of a destiny neither asked for nor wanted. Abaddon did not kneel before the corpse emperor who sat immobile upon the golden throne, nor did he surrender to the seductive whispers of the chaos gods who had tainted his bloodline. Instead, he stood between worlds, a living reminder of a war that had never truly ended. The Eye of Terror churned like a wounded beast beneath his feet. Its swirling storms of warp energy mirrored the tempest within him. On the broken corpse world of Malium, Abaddon stood alone beneath a blood-red sky, the air thick with the stench of death and despair. Around him, the ruins of an ancient civilization cracked and crumbled like old bones, relics of a past empire that had dared challenge fate and lost. In the heart of the shattered city, half buried beneath twisted metal and shattered obsidian, lay an artifact, a claw jagged and blackened with warp corruption, yet untouched by time's decay. It was the claw of Horus himself, the physical remnant of the man whose shadow still stretched across the stars. Abaddon's hand trembled as he reached for it. The weight of the claw was not just physical. It carried centuries of hopes, betrayals, and curses. To some, it was a symbol of damnation, a cursed relic that foretold ruin. To others, it was a beacon of unbroken will, a spark of defiance against the suffocating darkness of the Imperium. As he closed his fingers around the claw, a cold fire ignited in his chest. It was a fire born of hatred, not just for the Imperium that had betrayed him, but for the gods and men alike who had failed to claim the future. His voice, low and resolute, whispered to the void, "The galaxy has forgotten the true power of the despoiler. It will remember." Yet within that declaration lay a fracture, for Abaddon knew that his rise would not be without sacrifice. The path ahead was littered with the corpses of brothers, of friends, of the empire they once called home. He was haunted by the ghosts of terror, by the screams of the siege, by the face of Horus in his final moments, broken, betrayed, and alone. His eyes, cold and unyielding, scanned the horizon where the last dying suns bled their light into shadow. To many, he was a monster, a harbinger of destruction who would usher in the final fall of the Imperium. But to others, He was the last hope of a fractured legacy, the man who might wrest control from gods and men alike, to carve out a new empire from the ashes of the old. Abaddon did not trust either vision. He was neither savior nor destroyer. He was something far older and far more dangerous, a survivor bound by hatred, driven by the need to forge a destiny beyond gods and kings. As the stars wheeled silently overhead, a new chapter in the endless war was beginning. The claw of Horus, clenched tight in Abaddon's hand, pulsed with dark promise. And somewhere, in the deep shadows between worlds, the first whispers of rebellion stirred. The galaxy had fallen into silence, but that silence was about to be shattered. In the vast void where shattered stars hung like forgotten jewels, Ezekiel Abaddon moved with purpose, silent, relentless, and full of burning intent. The claw of Horus, now a dark talisman against his gauntleted hand, was more than a relic. It was a symbol, a banner under which scattered remnants of a once great legion might rally. But gathering shattered souls into a force capable of defying the Imperium was no small task. The sons of a broken god do not easily follow another's command. Abaddon's ship, the vengeful spirit, tore through the warp storms like a predator stalking prey. Its black hull shimmered faintly with the eerie glow of warp taint, a reminder of the darkness they had all embraced, willingly or not. Around him, a gathering of warlords, brutal champions of fractured warbands, gathered for a convergence that could ignite a new war or plunge them all into ruin. The chamber aboard the vengeful spirit was vast and austere, lit by dim braziers filled with cold blue flames. Abaddon sat upon a throne wrought from the blackened remains of 1,000 fallen banners, his eyes sharp beneath a war mask forged in the image of his father's death. The warlords stood before him, their faces scarred and hardened by centuries of betrayal and violence. Loyalty was a scarce currency here, traded in whispers and blood. Among them was Luparax, a hulking brute whose loyalty was as fierce as his temper. Once a captain of the Sons of Horus, now a warlord in his own right, Luparax respected strength, but never blind obedience. By contrast, Kavara, slender and cunning, wore a smile that never reached his eyes. His ambition burned beneath a veneer of charm, and his words were dipped in poison. Abaddon knew Kavara's loyalty was a blade pointed at his back, but for now it served his purposes. The First Council was a delicate dance of power and suspicion. Abaddon spoke not as a king commanding subjects, but as a brother calling for unity among broken kin. Our strength lies not in the gods we serve, but in the will we wield, Abaddon said, his voice a low rumble that filled the chamber. The Imperium trembles on the brink of decay. We will be the hammer that shatters their fragile peace. But to do so, we must be one, not fractured shadows, but a single storm. Murmurs rippled through the warlords. Some nodded, others scowled. Abaddon knew the cost of this unity would be high. Each warlord sought his own claim. Each captain coveted power like a starving beast. To bind them was to cage wildfires with chains forged of steel and blood. Later, as the council dispersed, Abaddon retreated to the ship's lower decks. The whispers of the vengeful spirit seemed to mock him, echoing through corridors lined with the trophies of fallen enemies. He could feel the weight of eyes upon him, the warlords who watched and waited for weakness, the spectres of a past filled with shattered trusts. His closest advisor, Malrik, lay poisoned in his quarters, his breath shallow and fading. The betrayal was swift, and its sting deep. Kavara's hand was suspected but unprovable. Abaddon's rage was a dark flame, burning hotter than any sun. but his outward composure remained unbroken. To lead the sons of a fallen god, Abaddon whispered to himself, one must be harder than the void itself. That night, in the cold silence of the warp, he walked among the shadows of the vengeful spirit's deck. Memories clawed at him, the screams of terror, the flames consuming his father, the weight of failure. But beneath it all, a new resolve grew. He would not be a puppet of fate or the gods. He would carve his own path, no matter the cost. At dawn, the ship altered course toward the war-torn system of Axion. There, scattered warbands fought in brutal skirmishes over a forsaken world rich with relics and weapon caches. Abaddon's plan was simple. Unite these fractured forces under one banner, or destroy those who refused. In the dim light of Axion's dying sun, Abaddon met Luperac's once more, this time not as a leader and warlord, but as comrades in the endless war. We fight for more than vengeance, Abaddon said quietly. We fight for a future where the names Sons of Horus and Black Legion are feared once more. But fear alone will not hold us together. Luperax grunted, his massive frame silhouetted against the red horizon. And if fear isn't enough, Abaddon's gaze hardened, then we will give them a reason to fear. Their alliance, forged in fire and blood, was both promise and warning. They were united by hatred for the Imperium, but divided by ambition and mistrust. Every step forward was shadowed by the threat of betrayal, and every victory tasted of bitter sacrifice. As the Black Legion's banners unfurled over Axion's scarred surface, Abaddon stood amidst the carnage, the claw of Horus gleaming in the dying light. The stars beyond seemed to pulse in rhythm with his heartbeat, a silent herald of the storm to come. And so, the slow gathering of darkness began, a tempest born not just of war, but of the fragile bonds of loyalty and the sharp edges of ambition. Abaddon's path was set, but the price of his rise would be paid in blood, his own and that of countless others. The galaxy, once silent, was beginning to scream again. The void was cold, indifferent, a vast ocean of silence where only the pulse of the warp and the echoes of war spoke truths. The vengeful spirit drifted like a shadow through this emptiness, its black hull etched with scars from battles long past. Inside its ancient corridors, Ezekiel Abaddon contemplated a convergence unlike any before, not just a gathering of warlords, but an alliance with the Iron Warriors, the relentless forge masters of siege and ruin, led by Perturabo, the war master known for his iron will and colder heart. Abaddon's mind churned as he prepared for this meeting. There was no love between him and Perturabo, only necessity. Both men bore the marks of betrayal and disillusionment, yet each understood that the fracturing of their forces would spell doom for any hope of revenge against the Imperium. The chamber where they met was stark, a fortress of cold metal and grinding machinery. Perturabo, massive and towering in his ceramite armor, stood like a living monument to relentless siegecraft. His eyes, pale and unforgiving, pierced Abaddon with a judgment as sharp as any blade. "You seek to forge a chain, Abaddon," Perturabo said, his voice a grinding rasp. "But a chain is only as strong as its weakest link. Your sons bicker like children, and your loyalty is as fractured as the ruins of the worlds we siege." Abaddon met his gaze without flinching. "The Imperium is a fortress rotting from within. It will fall to those who strike hardest and hold firm. Your mastery of siegecraft will be invaluable. But understand this. My vision is not to serve under another's command, not even yours." Perturabo's lips curled into a grim smile. Then you build a throne of blades, a seat of power from which the very weapons that brought it into being will one day sever your hands. The warning was clear, but Abaddon accepted it. Betrayal was inevitable in the shadows they walked, and yet they needed each other's strength. The pact was forged with words sharp as obsidian and promises heavy with iron. Outside the fortress chamber, the galaxy shifted beneath the weight of their alliance. On worlds consumed by fire and steel, the sons of Horus and the Iron Warriors struck in unison, a tempest of destruction that tore through Imperial defenses like a blade through silk. The Imperium scrambled to respond, but its fractured forces could not hold against this new fury. Yet even as battle raged, Abaddon's thoughts turned inward. He pondered the nature of power and loyalty, the fragile bonds that held men together in times of war. His own ambitions were no longer bound to the shadow of his father, Horus. He was becoming something else, something older, colder, and more calculating. In the quiet moments between raids, Abaddon would stare into the claw of Horus, feeling the weight of history in its jagged edges. It was a reminder that the past was never truly dead, and the future was carved by those willing to wield the darkness. One night, as the vengeful spirit sailed through the warped, stormy seas, Abaddon received a visitor, a demon of whispered legends, neither fully formed nor entirely spectral, approached him in a private chamber, a messenger from the chaos gods themselves. "You reject our gifts, despoiler," it hissed, voice like grinding bone. "Yet you wield a blade born of our essence. Why deny the power that could make you king?" Abaddon's eyes burned with cold fire. "I do not seek kingship beneath false gods. My throne will be forged by my own hand, or not at all." The demon's laughter was a bitter echo fading into the void. "Beware, mortal. The chains you forge will bind you tighter than any throne." Abaddon knew the truth in those words, but he would not show fear. He was the architect of his own destiny, even if that path led through shadows darker than the warp itself. In the days that followed, the Iron Pact, this fragile alliance of necessity, began to reshape the war. Worlds fell like dying stars, their cries swallowed by the void. The Imperium's grip loosened, and Abaddon's vision of a new order took form. Yet beneath the victories, doubt gnawed at him. Was he repeating the mistakes of Horus? Was ambition a curse or a calling? Each step forward was a step deeper into darkness, and the line between conqueror and tyrant blurred with every sacrifice. As the vengeful spirit sailed onward, Abaddon's resolve hardened. The galaxy would remember the name Black Legion, not as the sons of a fallen god, but as the harbingers of a new age. And he, Ezekiel Abaddon, would be the storm that reshaped the stars. But Perturabo's warning echoed in his mind like a death knell. The blades you raise may one day cut your own flesh. The grand hall of the vengeful spirit was alive with shadows and whispered promises. The air hung thick with the scent of ancient incense, its smoke curling around banners blackened by centuries of war. The warlords gathered once more, their eyes gleaming with hunger and suspicion beneath the flickering glow of cold blue flames. Tonight was not merely a meeting. It was a feast of lies. Abaddon sat high upon the obsidian throne, the claw of Horus gleaming in his grip like a beacon of damnation. He wore it openly now, no longer hiding behind veils of secrecy or doubt. To some, it was a sacred relic, a testament to the legacy of a war master who had dared to challenge the Imperium itself. To others, it was a mark of hubris, a sign that the despoiler was doomed to repeat the tragic fall of his father. The warlords drank deep from their chalices, their laughter harsh and brittle. In this gathering, alliances were made not with oaths, but with steel beneath cloaks and daggers behind backs. Trust was a luxury none could afford, and Abaddon knew it. Kavara, the serpent in the court, moved with practiced grace among the guests. His smile was a mask, hiding the venom of ambition that coiled beneath. For months, he had whispered poison into the ears of those discontented with Abaddon's rise. In the shadows, he wove a web of betrayal thick enough to choke the strongest of loyalties. Abaddon's gaze flicked toward Kavara, the flicker of disdain barely hidden beneath a mask of calm. Watch the serpent closely, Malric had warned him earlier. But even Malric was dead now, his life snuffed out by unseen treachery. The feast would soon reveal whether Abaddon's trust was his greatest strength or his most fatal weakness. Rising from his throne, Abaddon addressed the assembly, his voice a low thunder rolling through the hall. We gather not as fractured war bands, but as the Black Legion. Our enemies believe us broken, scattered ghosts of a fallen god. But we are more. We are vengeance incarnate. We are the reckoning the Imperium deserves. Cheers erupted, a roar of steel and fury. But beneath the noise, knives were sharpened, and eyes watched with deadly intent. As the feast wore on, the first shadows of betrayal took form. Assassins, hidden among the guests, struck with swift precision. Blood spilled across the marble floor, the crimson painting a stark contrast to the pale cold stone. Chaos erupted within the hall. Warlords turned on each other, blades flashing beneath shattered banners. Abaddon's warriors, fierce and unyielding, quelled the uprising with brutal efficiency. Kavara's name was whispered in accusation, but proof was lost amid the chaos. The despoiler's rage burned hotter than any forge, but he kept it locked behind his mask. Every death was a lesson carved into his soul. The cost of power was always paid in blood. Retreating to the quiet of his chambers, Abaddon faced the claw of Horus once more. The relic pulsed with dark power, a reminder that destiny was not a path to be walked lightly. The screams of terror echoed in his mind. The fire, the betrayal, the fall. He vowed silently that his crusade would not end as Horus's had. Yet even as the Black Legion's unity was forged in blood, the cracks ran deep. Kavara's betrayal was a symptom, not a disease. Ambition, mistrust, and the thirst for power gnawed at the edges of their fragile alliance. The despoiler knew that to build an empire from ruin, he must be both king and executioner. Days later, the vengeful spirit emerged from the eye of terror, its course set for the war-torn world of Malador. Here, relics of the old Imperium waited buried beneath ash and ruin, treasures to be claimed or destroyed. Abaddon stood upon the bridge, the cold stars stretching infinite before him. He did not speak of glory or conquest. Instead, his mind dwelled on the nature of power and sacrifice. "I will not fight for another's dream," he muttered, the words a vow and a curse. "I will forge my own destiny from the bones of empires." The galaxy was a chessboard, and every move carved new shadows. The feast had shown him that even brothers could become enemies, and trust was the rarest of treasures. As the vengeful spirit's engines roared, carrying the Black Legion into the darkness, Abaddon felt the weight of the claw deepen upon his hand. It was a burden and a promise that the storm was coming, and the stars themselves would tremble beneath its fury. The warp was a storm without mercy, a swirling chaos of colour and shadow, where time bent and reality fractured. To traverse it was to walk a path lined with madness and death. Yet Abaddon embraced its fury like a lover's cruel embrace. He sought something lost in the twisting tides, a weapon worthy of his newfound purpose, a blade forged not by mortal hands, but in the fires of the immaterium itself. The vengeful spirit plunged deeper into the warp's roiling heart, where the whispers of demons brushed like icy fingers across his mind. Here, the veil between worlds thinned, and the past collided with the present in visions both vivid and haunting. He saw Horus, not as the war master of legend, but as a broken man on the verge of ruin. The final moments of the heresy replayed endlessly. The screams of terror, the burning of the emperor's palace, the final betrayal that shattered everything. Horus's face was etched with pain and fury, a mirror reflecting what Abaddon feared to become. The warp's shadows gave form to his memories, and Abaddon felt the cold touch of destiny pressing upon him. He knew he could not walk the same path, yet the power he sought required a price few dared pay. Within the depths of the immaterium, the blade awaited. Drachnian, the demon sword, was whispered of in the darkest corners of the galaxy, a weapon both blessing and curse. Its edge could rend the flesh of angels and demons alike, but its voice carried a sinister promise, power at the cost of one's very soul. When Abaddon laid eyes upon Drachnian, its blackened blade shimmered with an unnatural light, veins of warp energy pulsing like a living thing. The sword seemed to breathe, to whisper ancient secrets of dominion and destruction. He reached out, and as his hand closed, around the hilt, a surge of power coursed through him, a fire that burned cold and bright. The sword spoke in voices that echoed within his mind, voices of chaos and temptation, of gods that demanded servitude and loyalty. Abaddon's heart clenched. He had sworn never to kneel to the chaos gods, to forge a destiny beyond their grasp. Yet the sword's power was undeniable, and with it came visions of a throne atop the ruins of the Imperium, a realm ruled not by fear, but by iron will. The struggle was silent but fierce, between ambition and caution, between the desire for absolute power and the fear of losing oneself to corruption. For a moment, Abaddon faltered, the sword's whispers threatening to drown his resolve. But he was no longer the pawn of fate or gods. With grim determination, he severed the chains of temptation, claiming the sword not as a servant, but as a master. Drachnian was now an extension of his will, a weapon that bore the weight of his burden and the promise of his vengeance. Emerging from the warp storms, the vengeful spirit sailed forth transformed. Abaddon's eyes burned with a cold fire, the light of the claw in one hand and the demon's sword in the other. His ambitions no longer hid in shadow. They blazed like twin stars heralding a new dawn of war. Yet, even as power surged through his veins, the sword's curse lingered. A whisper in the night, a reminder that every gift from the warp bore a price. The Black Legion awaited their master's command, their banners black as the void, their souls forged in hate and loyalty. The first Black Crusade was about to begin, a crusade not merely for conquest, but for a reckoning written in blood and fire. As Abaddon stood upon the bridge, the cold stars beyond reflected in his eyes. He knew this was only the beginning. The path ahead was dark and treacherous, but it was his to walk, alone or accompanied by those brave enough to follow. The galaxy would soon learn that the despoiler did not seek to rebuild what was lost. He sought to remake everything. The fires of war were kindled anew across shattered stars. The Black Legion, unified under Abaddon's ruthless command, carved a path of devastation through the Imperium's fringes. Planets once forgotten became battlegrounds drenched in blood and flame, echoes of a rebellion born not only of hatred, but of a grim purpose. Yet, beyond the roar of bolters and the clash of blades, a quieter storm raged within Abaddon's soul. Power had been claimed, weapons forged, alliances made, but the price of leadership weighed heavier than any armor. The echoes of betrayal still haunted the dark corridors of the vengeful spirit, and the claws of paranoia gripped the despoiler's heart tighter with each passing day. Luparax, the brutal warlord once loyal without question, now bore a different look. Suspicion etched deep in his scarred face. Whispers circulated among the war bands. Dissent brewed beneath the surface of obedience. Abaddon sensed it. The fragile thread of loyalty fraying dangerously close to breaking. One night, beneath the cold glare of a dying star, Abaddon summoned Luparax to the War Council. The chamber was tense, filled with unspoken threats and the weight of countless battles. Abaddon's voice was low but commanding as he spoke. Strength holds this legion together, but trust is the keystone. Tell me, Luparax, do you still stand with me, or does your loyalty lie elsewhere? Luparax's eyes flashed with a mixture of anger and doubt. You speak of trust, despoiler, but trust is a currency you have spent recklessly. I have seen brothers fall by your hand, and the claw of Horus weighs heavy with the ghosts of the past. Abaddon's grip tightened on the claw. The past is not a chain to bind us, but a forge to temper us. I do what must be done to ensure our survival. Betrayal is the poison we fight, not the cure. Their confrontation was a fragile dance. Brother against brother, leader against lieutenant. Yet, beneath the surface, a deeper truth lingered. The line between loyalty and ambition was blurred, and every decision could tip the balance toward ruin. Meanwhile, Kavara's schemes grew bolder. The serpentine warlord moved in shadows, gathering those disillusioned with Abaddon's rule. His whispers promised power and freedom from the despoiler's iron grip, and many listened, their hearts torn between fear and hope. But Abaddon was no fool. His spies were everywhere, and the seeds of treason were plucked before they could take root. Kavara's name became a curse among loyalists, a reminder that even within darkness, light could be a weapon. As the Black Legion's forces amassed near the imperial fortress world of Caliban, a place steeped in history and tragedy, Abaddon contemplated the cost of his crusade. This was no mere conquest. It was a reckoning with the legacy of Horus and the sins that had fractured the galaxy. The campaign ahead promised bloodshed and glory, but also sacrifice. Abaddon's thoughts returned to the demon sword, Drachnian, its whispering presence a constant reminder of the thin line he walked between salvation and damnation. In the silence before battle, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. The faces of fallen brothers haunted him, Malric, Luparax before his doubts, even Horus himself. Were they all doomed to be consumed by the very fires they stoked? Or could he, alone, break the cycle? The answer remained elusive, buried beneath layers of hatred and ambition. Yet one truth was clear. The Black Legion was more than a legion of warriors. It was a force of reckoning, a storm that would not be stilled until the galaxy itself was reshaped. As the vengeful spirit approached Caliban's orbit, the stars seemed to hold their breath. The clash to come would echo through eternity, a battle not only for territory, but for the soul of a broken empire. Abaddon's voice, cold and unyielding, rang out across the bridge. Prepare the Black Legion. The Imperium's false light ends here. The skies over Caliban churned with storm and shadow. as if the very heavens mourned the reckoning about to unfold. Below, the fortress world's shattered forests and jagged cliffs stood silent witness to centuries of secrets and sorrow. It was a land steeped in legend, the birthplace of the dark angels and a tomb for ghosts long forgotten. Now it was the stage for a confrontation that would ripple through the stars. Ezekiel Abaddon stood upon the bridge of the vengeful spirit, his gaze fixed on the battered planet below. The claw of Horus, blackened and jagged, gleamed ominously in his gauntleted hand, a reminder of the legacy he bore and the path he must follow. The demon's sword, Drachnian, hung at his side, its cursed whispers a constant companion in the silence between war and destiny. Beside him, Luparax's eyes burned with a conflicted fire, a mix of loyalty, anger, and doubt. Their uneasy alliance was forged in blood, but threatened by mistrust. The warlord had stood beside Abaddon through countless battles, yet the scars of their shared past ran deep, and the weight of the impending war pressed heavily on his soul. The Imperium's grip on Caliban is fragile, Luparax said, his voice rough like grinding stone. Their defenders fight with desperation, but they still hold fast. We cannot afford hesitation. Abaddon nodded, his face a mask of cold determination. The Black Legion does not hesitate. We are the reckoning. The past binds us no longer. We forge the future in fire and blood. As the Black Legion deployed, the planet's surface erupted into chaos. Thunderous detonations rocked the scarred forests, while shadowy figures moved like wraiths beneath the shattered canopy. The air was thick with smoke and ash, the scent of burning resin mingling with the acrid sting of promethium. In the midst of battle, Abaddon felt the eyes of the past upon him, the ghosts of Horus, the fallen Primarchs, and the millions lost in the heresy. Their silent judgment weighed upon him, yet he pressed forward, fueled by a grim resolve that knew no rest. Deep within the ruined city of Caliban's capital, Kavara moved like a serpent through the chaos. His treachery had not been forgotten, and his ambitions had festered like a poison. But even in the heat of war, his charm was a deadly weapon, twisting loyalties and sowing discord among the defenders. Abaddon's forces clashed with the Imperial defenders in brutal close combat. Bolters roared, chainswords bit through ceramite armor, and the ground itself seemed to tremble beneath the fury of war. The Black Legion's banners, black as the void, waved over the blood-soaked battlefield, a symbol of vengeance and despair. In the shadows of a crumbling cathedral, Abaddon faced his greatest challenge. A squad of elite dark angels, brothers of the same bloodline that had once called Caliban home, stood between him and victory. Their armor was worn but resolute, their eyes burning with unyielding faith. The duel was fierce and brutal, a clash of titans beneath shattered stained glass and broken spires. Abaddon's strikes were precise, his demon sword singing a song of death with every swing. Yet the defenders fought not just with skill, but with a desperate hope born of centuries-old loyalty. As the fight raged, Abaddon felt the claw of Horus grow heavy in his grasp. The weight of legacy was more than mere burden. It was a chain, binding him to the sins of the past. In that moment, a whisper of doubt pierced his armor of resolve. Was he truly the harbinger of a new dawn, or merely a shadow doomed to repeat history's mistakes? But there was no time for hesitation. With a final, devastating blow, Abaddon struck down the last of the defenders. The cathedral crumbled around him, dust and ruin burying the echoes of an ancient faith. Emerging from the wreckage, he raised the claw high, a silent vow to the stars. The Black Legion would not falter. Their crusade was just beginning. Yet, as the fires of war consume Caliban, a new threat stirred in the darkness. Unseen and insidious, the seeds of betrayal planted by Kavara grew deeper, threatening to unravel the fragile alliance Abaddon had fought so hard to build. The warlord's whispers reached the ears of the discontented, promising power and freedom from Abaddon's iron grasp. Loyalties would be tested, brothers would fall, and the path to conquest would become a labyrinth of treachery. Above the shattered world, the storm cloud swirled like a living thing. The galaxy itself seemed to hold its breath, waiting for the next move in a game played by gods and monsters. Abaddon's voice, cold and unyielding, cut through the storm's roar. The stars shall burn, and the empire shall fall, but the Black Legion will rise from the ashes, eternal, unbroken, unstoppable. The battle for Caliban was won, but the war for the soul of the Black Legion and the fate of the galaxy was far from over. The aftermath of Caliban's fall was a silence heavy with ash and blood. The forests, once vast and teeming with life, lay smothered beneath a blanket of ruin. The screams of battle had faded, but their echoes lingered in every shattered stone, every broken spine of a ruined cathedral. The Black Legion's victory was complete, but the cost was etched deep into the flesh of the Legion itself. Abaddon stood upon the scorched soil, his armor marked with soot and crimson, the claw of Horus heavy upon his hand. Around him, the Black Legion regrouped, hardened warriors bound by blood and vengeance, but also shadowed by doubt. The war had been brutal, and though their enemies lay broken, the wounds within their own ranks festered. The bitter taste of victory was tempered by whispers of betrayal. Kavara, the serpent among them, had vanished into the labyrinthine corridors of the vengeful spirit, leaving behind trails of deceit and fractured alliances. His poison seeped through the hearts of the discontented, threatening to unravel the fragile unity Abaddon had forged. The despoiler's eyes narrowed. This was no longer merely a war against the Imperium. It was a war within, a battle for the soul of the Black Legion itself. That night, beneath a sky where distant stars blinked cold and indifferent, Abaddon convened his war council. The chamber was dim, lit only by flickering hololiths, casting ghostly shadows against cold stone. The warlords gathered, some loyal, some wary, all burdened by the weight of what was to come. "Caliban is ours," Abaddon began, his voice steady but edged with steel. "But our enemies are not just the defenders who fell beneath our blades. The greatest threat lies in the hearts of those who doubt us." Luparax, standing tall, despite the scars of battle, stepped forward. "We are warriors, Despoiler, but even the fiercest blade can be broken if the hand that wields it falters." A murmur of agreement rippled through the chamber. Kavara's absence was a shadow that loomed large. His treachery was a wound festering in silence, and Abaddon knew it would not heal without pain. Later, in the solitude of his quarters, Abaddon confronted the claw of Horus once more. It seemed to pulse with a life of its own, an echo of a legacy steeped in triumph and tragedy. The relic was a constant reminder of the burden he bore, the sins of a father and the hopes of a son. "Immortality is a curse," he whispered to the claw, voice rough with fatigue. "To live through the ages, watching all you love crumble to dust, to bear the weight of endless war, endless betrayal." The demon's sword, Drachnian, lay on the table, its dark blade shimmering with latent power. Abaddon's fingers brushed the hilt, feeling the cold hunger of the weapon's curse. It was a reminder that every gift came with a price, every victory with sacrifice. The Despoiler's mind turned to the Legion's future, The Black Crusade was no longer a distant dream. It was a rising storm. Yet to command it, he would need to root out the venom among his ranks, to wield not just strength but cunning and ruthlessness. The next days were a relentless tide of action and suspicion. Kavara's influence poisoned many, whispering promises of freedom from Abaddon's iron grip. Skirmishes broke out not just against Imperial remnants, but among those who once fought side by side. Abaddon's solution was swift and merciless. Loyalty would be enforced by fire and steel, and traitors would find no refuge in the shadows. The despoiler became both judge and executioner, his decisions weighing heavily on his soul. In the quiet moments, doubt gnawed at him. Was he becoming the very monster he sought to destroy? Was the price of immortality his own humanity? But there was no turning back. The galaxy was a crucible, and he was its storm. The Black Legion's banners, black as the void, unfurled once more across the stars. The next campaign loomed, a war not just for conquest, but for survival. And in the heart of the storm, Ezekiel Abaddon stood resolute, the claw of Horus in one hand and the demon sword in the other, ready to carve his name into the annals of eternity. The silence that followed the Black Legion's advance was deceptive, an ominous lull before the storm. Across the warped tapestry of the galaxy, whispers of rebellion and chaos stirred like distant thunder. Abaddon knew well that power won was never power secured. Every victory invited new foes, new betrayals. In the cold recesses of the vengeful spirit, the cracks within the Black Legion's unity deepened. Kavara's poison had spread far beyond what even the Serpent had anticipated. Factions grew bold, emboldened by promises of freedom and whispers of overthrow. Abaddon's sharp mind grasped the fracturing, but his heart felt the ache of brothers turning against brothers. The claw of Horus seemed to grow heavier with each passing day, a symbol not only of power, but of burden, the legacy of a fallen god, weighing down upon mortal shoulders. One night, as the void outside the ship shimmered with distant stars, Abaddon stood alone in his chamber, gazing into the claw's jagged silhouette. The diamond sword, Draconian, rested nearby, its dark pulse a reminder of the delicate balance he maintained between mortal will and warp-fueled power. A knock at the door shattered the quiet. "Enter," Abaddon commanded, voice cold but steady. The figure that stepped inside was unexpected. Malric, once thought dead, now returned from the shadows. His eyes burned with a mixture of sorrow and resolve. His survival was a secret known to few, a tale of exile and hidden strength. "Despoiler," Malric said, his voice a low rumble. "The Legion fractures beneath us. Kavara's followers grow bolder. We face not only the Imperium's might, but the treachery within." Abaddon's gaze hardened. "I know. That serpent's venom runs deep. We must act before the poison consumes us." Together, they began to weave a plan, a purge not just of traitors, but of doubt itself. The Black Legion needed unity, forged not merely in battle, but in loyalty and fear. The line between justice and tyranny blurred, but Abaddon embraced the darkness. It was a necessary sacrifice. The purge was swift and brutal. The vengeful spirit became a crucible of judgment, where whispers turned to screams and blood stained the cold floors. Some fell by blade, others vanished in the shadows, their fate unknown but feared. Each execution weighed upon Abaddon's soul, a chain tightening around his heart. Was this the path to salvation, or the descent into madness? Yet, in the depths of his being, he knew there was no other way. Meanwhile, the Imperium regrouped. The Great Rift had split the galaxy, but loyalists rallied beneath new banners of hope and vengeance. Abaddon's crusade was no longer a secret. It was a beacon of terror. On the bridge, as battle plans unfolded, Abaddon stared out at the swirling storm of stars. The war ahead would be brutal and unrelenting. Allies would betray, enemies would strike, and the line between victory and annihilation was perilously thin. The claw of Horus gleamed darkly in his hand, a reminder that even the mightiest fall. Yet Abaddon's resolve was unshaken. He was not merely a warrior, he was a force of nature, an eternal storm. As the vengeful spirit surged forward, the galaxy held its breath. The reckoning was coming. The clash of titans resounded across the shattered stars. The vengeful spirit, a black monolith of wrath and destiny, led the Black Legion into the heart of the Imperium's shattered realms. Here, in the war-ravaged sectors beyond the Eye of Terror, the final crucible awaited. A battle not only for worlds, but for the very soul of the galaxy. Abaddon stood upon the bridge, eyes burning like twin suns. The claw of Horus felt alive in his grasp, thrumming with ancient power and forgotten sorrows. Beside it, Draconian pulsed softly, the demon sword a dark heartbeat beneath the cold steel of his armor. The war had transformed him. No longer just a warrior or leader, he was the embodiment of vengeance itself, the eternal storm raging against the dying light of the Imperium. Reports crackled over Vox channels, each message a litany of destruction and despair. Imperial fleets shattered beneath the Black Legion's relentless assault. Worlds surrendered or burned to ash. Yet the war was far from won. For every victory, new enemies rose from the ashes, and betrayal festered still within his own ranks. A shadow moved in the corner of Abaddon's vision. Kavara, the serpent who had long slithered through the corridors of power, emerged from the darkness, his eyes gleaming with twisted cunning. "Your crusade is bold, despoiler," Kavara said smoothly, voice like silk over steel. "But even storms can be broken, even legends can fall." Abaddon's gaze hardened. "Speak your venom, serpent. But remember, I hold the claw of Horus. I have walked through fire and death. You are but a shadow in my path." Kavara smiled, a cruel twist of lips. "We shall see, Abaddon. The galaxy is a web, and you, the spider, are not immune to its traps." Their words hung heavy in the charged air. The Black Legion watched, silent but watchful, as two forces of ambition and betrayal faced each other in a dance as old as time. The battle that followed was cataclysmic. Imperial ships rose like titans from the void, their void shields shimmering against the onslaught. Bolter fire tore through void and armor alike, and the void itself seemed to tremble beneath the fury of war. Abaddon led the charge, his demon sword singing a deadly hymn. He struck down champions of the Imperium and demon, alike a whirlwind of destruction and will. Yet, even as he fought, the weight of his choices bore down. Betrayal from within was the cruelest wound. Allies turned to enemies in the blink of an eye. Whispers of rebellion and treachery echoed like ghosts. Kavara's poison was a cancer threatening to consume the Black Legion from the inside. In the heat of battle, Abaddon's resolve was tested. He remembered the faces of those lost, the promises broken, the sins that chained him. The claw of Horus pulsed with dark energy, as if sharing his torment. Yet, in that crucible of war and blood, a decision crystallized. Power was no gift, but a burden to be wielded with ruthless clarity. Mercy was a weakness he could no longer afford. With a roar that shook the void, Abaddon called the Black Legion to rally. "We are the reckoning. We are the storm that shatters the stars. No traitor, no enemy shall stand before us. The battle turned, chaos bending to the will of the despoiler. Imperial fleets scattered, retreating into the cold darkness. Yet, victory was a bitter cup. The wounds ran deep, and the cost was etched in the silence of the dead. As the fires of war dimmed, Abaddon stood alone on the bridge, staring into the cold stars. The claw of Horus felt heavier than ever, a reminder that destiny was both a crown and a shackle. The galaxy was vast and broken, and the path ahead was shrouded in shadow. But the despoiler's fury was eternal. The final reckoning had begun. The shadows deepened across the Black Legion's war-torn path. Victory after victory had scarred the stars, but the peace between battles was a fragile illusion, a thin veneer masking the growing tempest within. Abaddon's empire was vast, but it teetered precariously on the edge of ruin, fractured by the unseen forces of ambition and betrayal. Kavara's whispers had become a haunting melody, threading through the minds of the discontented. His promises of freedom and power lured even the staunchest loyalists into doubt. The serpent's venom threatened to dissolve the bonds that held the Legion together, transforming brothers in arms into strangers cloaked in suspicion. On the bridge of the vengeful spirit, Abaddon stood alone, the cold light of distant stars casting long shadows across his gauntleted hands. The claw of Horus was heavier than ever, its jagged edges a cruel reminder of the legacy he bore, a legacy steeped in ruin and ambition. Beside him, the demon sword Draconian pulsed softly, its dark heartbeat a constant reminder of the price paid for power. The weight of immortality pressed down on him. To live beyond time was to witness the endless cycle of rise and fall, of empires built and shattered beneath the indifferent gaze of the cosmos. His heart, though forged in war and hatred, ached with the memories of those lost, the brothers fallen, and the dreams shattered by blood and fire. In the council chamber, the murmurs of unrest grew louder. Warlords once loyal now whispered in dark corners, eyes filled with greed and fear. Luparax, his battle-worn face scarred with doubt, challenged Abaddon's rule with veiled words and restless nights. Strength is more than fire and fury, Luparax had said during one heated council. It is unity. Without it, even the mightiest legion crumbles. Abaddon's reply was measured but cold. Unity forged in lies is no unity at all. The Black Legion stands on truth, the truth of power, and the reckoning it demands. The clash of ideals threatened to tear the Legion apart, but Abaddon was resolute. His vision was unyielding. A galaxy reshaped in the image of his will, cleansed by war and reborn in shadow. Yet, even the strongest resolve could not silence the creeping dread. Kavara's treachery was not merely a rebellion. It was a fracture within Abaddon's own soul, a reminder that power demanded sacrifice, not just from enemies, but from those closest to you. As the Black Legion prepared for its next campaign, a plunge into the heart of the Imperium's last bastions, Abaddon faced his darkest trial yet. To crush Kavara was not only a matter of survival, but of identity. To fail was to invite the Legion's undoing. The hunt for the serpent was a shadow war, waged in silence and blood. Operatives moved like ghosts, rooting out whispers and lies. The vengeful spirit became a crucible of suspicion, where trust was currency and betrayal was a blade waiting to strike. In a secret chamber, Abaddon confronted Kavara at last. The serpent's eyes gleamed with cold amusement, his smile a blade sharper than any sword. "You think yourself the master of fate, despoiler," Kavara hissed. But fate is a web, and even you are caught in its threads. Abaddon's grip tightened on the claw of Horus. I am no one's pawn. Your games end here. Their confrontation was a storm of words and wills, a battle as ancient as the stars themselves. The past, present, and future collided in the space between them, and only one would emerge unbroken. As the serpent fell, struck down by the fury of the despoiler's hand, the Black Legion trembled but endured. The venom was purged, but its scars would linger, a testament to the cost of power and the fragile nature of loyalty. In the quiet that followed, Abaddon stood once more on the bridge of the vengeful spirit. The stars beyond were cold and distant, indifferent to the struggles of mortals and immortals alike. He raised the claw of Horus, a symbol of both legacy and burden. The galaxy was broken, but not yet defeated. The storm would rage on. The skies above the shattered remnants of the Calixis sector were a turbulent canvas of dark clouds and distant flickering stars, a universe on the brink of collapse. Beneath this celestial tempest, Abaddon the Despoiler prepared to unleash the might of the Black Legion once more. For this was not merely a battle for territory or resources, but a crucible where destinies would be forged and shattered alike. The vengeful spirit loomed like a grim sentinel in orbit, its massive hull scarred from countless engagements, a testament to the unyielding fury it carried through the void. Within its war chambers, the atmosphere was taut with tension, every soul aboard sensing the weight of what was to come. Abaddon's eyes, cold and unrelenting, scanned the star maps projected before him. Each glowing point represented a world ripe for conquest or defiance, each a thread in the vast tapestry of war he sought to unravel. Yet amid the preparation and strategy, his mind was besieged by memories. Ghosts of loyalty and betrayal intertwined. The faces of fallen brothers haunted him, their silence a bitter echo in the halls of his heart. The legacy of Horus, the betrayal of his own kin, and the ever-looming spectre of the warp's corrupting influence pressed heavily upon him. This war, Abaddon muttered under his breath, is more than conquest. It is salvation, damnation, and the reckoning of all that came before. Beside him, Luperak stepped forward, his expression a grim mirror of determination and doubt. The Black Legion stands ready, Despoiler, but the cost of this crusade will be more than blood and fire. It will demand sacrifice from us all. Abaddon's response was resolute, yet tinged with the weight of fate. Sacrifice is the price of immortality and power. We are forged in it. The campaign that followed was a symphony of destruction. Worlds fell beneath the Black Legion's relentless advance, cities reduced to ash, and stars darkened by the fires of war. Yet, amid the chaos, internal fractures deepened, whispered betrayals, secret alliances, and the creeping dread of what power truly cost. As the Legion pushed deeper into the Imperium's heart, Abaddon's trust was tested anew. The serpent Kavara had been struck down, but his legacy of deceit lingered like a poison. Paranoia gnawed at even the fiercest warriors, and loyalty became a currency as precious and fragile as life itself. In the shadowed halls of the vengeful spirit, Abaddon confronted his own reflection. A man immortal yet burdened, a leader haunted by the ghosts of his past and the uncertain fate of his future. I am no god, he confessed to the silence, but neither am I mere man. I am the storm that will remake the stars, or be consumed by the darkness I wield. His voice was both a vow and a lament. The final confrontation loomed, a battle that would decide the fate of the Black Legion, the Imperium, and perhaps the galaxy itself. Allies would betray, enemies would rise, and sacrifices would be made in the shadows of dying suns. As the storm gathered, Abaddon embraced the path ahead, a path of fire, blood, and inevitable ruin. The reckoning was at hand. The final hour approached like the slow, inexorable fall of a dying star. The vengeful spirit loomed over the war-torn world of Valeria Prime, a shattered jewel in the Imperium's fractured crown. Below, the remnants of Imperial defenders clung to the ruins of their once mighty bastions, faces grim and resolute despite the overwhelming shadow cast by the Black Legion. Abaddon stood at the prow of his flagship, the claw of Horus clenched tightly in his gauntleted hand. The demon's sword Draconian hung at his side, its whispering hunger a constant reminder of the darkness that infused his very being. His eyes, cold and burning with a fierce intensity, scanned the battlefield, a realm of smoke, flame, and shattered hope. Around him, the Black Legion prepared for the final assault. Warriors clad in black ceramite moved with grim purpose, their banners fluttering like the wings of death across the sky. This was not merely a battle for a world. It was a culmination of a long and tortuous journey, a reckoning born of betrayal, ambition, and the relentless thirst for vengeance. Luparax approached, his face etched with scars and resolve. The enemy is desperate, but they fight with the fury of the damned. Their faith still burns strong, even as the darkness encroaches. Abaddon's voice was low but unwavering. Faith is but a fragile light. It bends, it breaks, and ultimately it dies in the shadow of truth. As the assault began, the skies roared with the fury of war. Thunderhawks screamed overhead, disgorging warriors into the heart of battle. Bolters spat fire and death, while demon engines lumbered forward like titans of nightmare. The ground shook beneath the fury, and the air thickened with the scent of burning flesh and ozone. In the midst of the chaos, Abaddon found himself face to face with the commander of the Imperial Defense, a warrior whose eyes bore the fire of unyielding resolve. Their duel was brutal, a clash of titans beneath a sky torn by fire and shadow. Every strike echoed the weight of histories long past, every parry a testament to the undying spirit of two opposing forces. But even as blades clashed, betrayal unfolded within the Black Legion's ranks. A faction, still loyal to Kavara's vision of freedom from Abaddon's reign, struck from the shadows. Explosions rocked the vengeful spirit. Trusted allies revealed as traitors fell beneath the despoiler's wrath. The battle was not only against the Imperium, but against the darkness that threatened to consume the Black Legion from within. In a desperate moment, Abaddon called upon the demon sword's cursed power, unleashing a storm of warp energy that shattered his foes and twisted the battlefield. The cost was great, the toll on his soul heavier still. The whispers of Draconian echoed louder, promising salvation in destruction. Yet, amid the fury, Abaddon's heart was steeled by a grim realization. Sacrifice was the only path to redemption, and victory was born from the ashes of loss. As the sun dipped below the horizon, the battlefield lay silent but broken. The Black Legion stood victorious, yet the price had been paid in blood and betrayal. Abaddon's gaze lifted to the stars, the claw of Horus a cold comfort in the gathering darkness. The war was not over. The galaxy remained a fractured realm, and the despoiler's crusade a storm that would rage until the last light faded. But in this moment of triumph and despair, one truth stood clear. The rise of Abaddon the Despoiler was both the beginning and the end of an era. The stars above were cold, indifferent sentinels watching the slow death of an empire. The vengeful spirit drifted silently through the void, its hull scarred and weary from centuries of war. Within its cold chambers, Ezekiel Abaddon sat alone, the claw of Horus resting heavily in his gauntlet, its jagged edges whispering echoes of a legacy soaked in blood and betrayal. Immortality, he thought bitterly, was not the gift it was promised to be. To endure beyond time was to witness the endless cycles of rise and fall, to bear the weight of every choice made in the name of vengeance and power. His soul was a battlefield, torn between the man he once was and the storm he had become. The demon sword, Drachnian, lay across his lap, its dark pulse a constant reminder of the curse he bore. It had fed on his fury and despair, growing stronger with every sacrifice, every broken bond. Yet it was also his strength, a symbol of the price he had paid to stand where he did. Outside, the galaxy burned with chaos. The Imperium was fractured, its once mighty legions scattered like leaves in a storm. The Black Legion, though battered and scarred by internal strife, remained a tempest of destruction and will, a force that would not be denied. Abaddon's thoughts drifted to the brothers lost, to the betrayal that had shaped his path. Horus, the War Master, whose shadow still clung to him like a shroud. Kavara, the serpent who had threatened to undo all he had built. The countless warriors who had fallen in the endless crusade. "What is the cost of immortality?" he whispered to the claw, voice rough and hollow. "Is it the death of hope, the sacrifice of everything that once made me human?" The question hung unanswered in the cold silence. A faint sound stirred him. Footsteps approaching. Luparax entered the chamber, battle-worn but resolute, the last of those who had stood with Abaddon through the darkest hours. "The Legion is ready for the next war," Luparax said quietly. "But I see the weight you carry, brother. The storm within you grows fiercer with every passing day." Abaddon looked up, eyes burning with a fire both fierce and weary. "The storm is eternal. So too must I be. But even storms must end, either in destruction or in rebirth." He rose, the claw of Horus gleaming coldly in the dim light. "The galaxy will remember this age as one of darkness and fire. My name will be whispered in fear and legend alike." Luparax nodded solemnly. "And what of the man beneath the armor? Will he find peace?" Abaddon's gaze turned distant, lost in the endless void beyond the ship's hull. "Peace is a dream for mortals. For me, it is the silence after the storm, the end of the reckoning." The vengeful spirit surged forward, a shadow cutting through the stars. The war was far from over. Empires would rise and fall, heroes would be made and broken, and the cycle of war and betrayal would continue. But in the heart of the darkness, Ezekiel Abaddon stood resolute. A man cursed with immortality, a warlord shaped by loss, ambition, and the endless quest for power. The claw of Horus was his burden and his legacy. The galaxy was his battlefield. And though the suns would die and the stars fade, the despoiler's storm would rage on, eternal, unyielding, and unstoppable.